This is Morning Perfect Base. I am going to work on actually, I'm not going to work on the perfect base today. I'm in the old base, Reverentville, I believe it's called. Uh, a friend of mine got on the server for the first time in a long time, so I just sort of hung out here with him. This is common ground. And actually, let me show you a little bit. That was the library, obviously. So the gravestones. I'm not going to narrate all of this. I'm just going to look around. There are a lot of signs which I think give the message pretty clearly, because I would rubber banding. Okay, I would like to talk about Keyforge. I talked about it a few weeks ago. Fantasy Flight Games, the guys who make Elder Sign, the Star Wars card game, Cosmic Encounters, I think, are making Keyforge as a new collectible deck game. The decks are procedurally generated and uniquely numbered, so that instead of spending $5 on an incredibly rare card that is good with Magic the Gathering, you can spend $20 on an incredibly rare deck that is good. So each deck has its own name, and that name is unique as the deck itself, which sounds great until you ask where this story is going and the game isn't been officially released yet. But they're already recalling decks for some of those procedurally generated names. Actually, the game's been released now, but before they released it, they were already recalling decks. We were really just left at the time to speculate on what types of names those would be. It's probably things like White Power, where you mash together two game elements that create a name with a clear negative social meaning. So we could expect recalled deck names to include Purple Rod of Ultimate Power, the Rigged Witch Hunt, the War of the Thirsty Bottom, Dominate the Children, T-Dill's Milk of Life, a tied-up dog person whose feet are in the foreground and he's got like these massive pecs with nipple piercings. And this one's about Israel. You can imagine. I think we can all appreciate how CCG deck names can be shifted around to be weird or inappropriate. They're doing pre-releases as of the writing of this, which is the 10th of November. The game itself came out on the 15th of November. I'd speculated at the time that it was just a marketing thing, but apparently one of the real deck names is Farmer of Racism, which is so weird. Either Fantasy Flight Games failed to remove racism from the dictionary of words they poured into the algorithm that makes names, or it randomly combined two other words and the algorithm didn't catch the result of a word that shouldn't have been allowed in. It's no big box hunter, but it's still quite the fuck up. Anyway, I didn't make this chicken coop. I don't know how to get out of it. So, oh fuck. I swim slightly. That's where all the chickens are, though. I was wondering where they were. I could hear them upstairs. They must have jittered through the floor or something. Or maybe they just escaped from... who knows? And nobody cares where the chickens came from. This one's called Don't Burn Your Balls in the Pie Pan. It's been rolling around my brain for a while, and it's more of a random factoid than a news thing, but bear with me. I mean, I'd like to think you're bearing with me on the premise of the section's title alone, but I take nothing I take nothing for granted from you. So this is the story of four guys who, circa 1912, decided that they would ride to every state's capital. I've never even been in this room before. Weird. So it took them 3 years and a lot of dead horses, but they did it. They rolled into the 1915 New York Expo expecting acclaim and book deals and money, and thank the heavens they didn't get it. Like, there's this thing where people want to do something legitimately difficult and we're all kinds of impressed. And way too often we're so impressed and those folks materially benefit from whatever it is. Look, I recognize that doing some things are hard, but sometimes those things are also stupid. I mean, you can brag about fucking a popping hot fuck. You can brag about fucking a piping hot pie without burning your balls in the pie pan, but that's not worthy of acclaim. I get that it's hard to do, and I respect that what you did is difficult, but no one should care, and not to be rude, we should all think you're a little too into whatever it was you just did. Sexually. Look, if a man writes a few sonnets, he loves her. If he writes 300, he loves writing sonnets. Doing irrelevant shit isn't laudable, and if someone has the resources to quit their job and ride a horse around the country for 3 years, maybe that person has a more constructive way to use those resources. Actually, that person definitely has a more constructive way to use those resources. There are only two reasons to do something like that. The Charles Lindbergh thing, where you show what's possible by flying across the Atlantic or trekking the North Pole or climbing Mount Everest, or going off your meds for 3 months, crashing your company's stock and getting removed by the board to distract from your failure to meet the commitments of your investment bubble in the form of an electric car company, because that was legitimately entertaining. The Rob Ford / Elon Musk School of Fantastic Self-Destructive Breakdown is the only kind of extreme accomplishment that's acceptable, because it is a universally fun watch. And speaking of things that are universally fun, this next article is Homeless Camp Destroyed. Okay, so this one is a local one, and I'm taking it almost line by line. Local police shut down a homeless camp this week. They called it a large camp in the article, but they don't mention how many people lived in it. The article instead talks about how the camp made local residents concerned, and they said it was near an elementary school. It was about a third of a mile from the school, and the school wasn't between the camp and the places most homeless people would want to go. I would be surprised if any of the homeless people passed in front of that school, but here we are. By leveraging kids, the residents are implying that the homeless folks are risks to kids. I'm not here to tell you that homeless folks aren't a greater danger than regular folks. They have little to lose and are not particularly well disposed towards a society which does not need or want them. It's possible, although not likely from the way the neighborhood is laid out, that some kids may have actually walked by the camp while it was up. I'm coming back here because this is the sunken church, and I think the new water physics is not entirely happening here. But still, it's leveraging bias against homeless folks and the think of the kids mentality to get the police to get rid of homeless people. I'm not even 100% sure if it was legal, but I'll talk about that later. The news did record 6 homeless people walking near the intersection where the camp was, and they described the camp recorded by a drone as extensive. But they didn't say they recorded how many people were at the camp, just how many were near the intersection between the road and the major road that it intersected with, another third of the mile away from the camp. They didn't even confirm those people were homeless. They just looked kind of poor and like they were walking. We don't see much of the drone footage, but whatever. The camp was extensive, in quotes, which means there were like tons of homeless people there, I'm sure. They described this whole thing as cleaning it up. They just want you to know there were a lot of homeless people there, because a lot of homeless people is a scary thing, and it justifies the use of police and city crews to clean it up. They don't call it destroying their homes. They don't call it confiscating their possessions. They don't call it getting them help. They use the euphemism of cleaning it up, because these people are just another untidy spill that suburbia needs mopped up by the city garbage collectors. A local woman said that she would do whatever it takes to help them along the way. I want to be clear that that woman will never see or think about the people she displaced again. When she says, we'll do... how did he get here? You're a creeper. This is my fortress. It's well lit by the lava. You dick. Come on. All right, well, he's dead now. When she says, we'll do whatever it takes, what that means is that she thinks it's a good idea to help homeless people, but she won't do anything about it, and she will have the city do whatever it can to keep them as far away from her as possible. She's more concerned for her safety and comfort than homeless people, and she is absolutely entitled to be concerned for her safety. Really, we're seeing a compassion dance where you say nice things because you're supposed to say nice things and be compassionate when the cameras are on and the threat is gone. And if you don't think about it, you can think that local homeowners and the police are the good guys here with their compassion and their cleanups and their willingness to help. They're not good guys. The police did their job, and the local homeowners just wanted the bad things to go away. I call them homeowners and not residents because the homeless people were residents. They resided there. But we don't acknowledge that because it's supposed to be understood that they're not supposed to be there. There are shelters for them to go to. Are there enough beds in those shelters? At those shelters, do the folks who need mental health get help? Detoxing? Of course, you don't know that about your city any more than I know that about my city. But I'm sure there aren't. I'm sure there aren't enough beds for the folks without homes in this country. So where are they supposed to sleep? Where can they exist if we don't let them? What's her name? Homeowner also said that she hoped they would become productive members of society. They're probably unemployed. But again, that's a conceit. There are employed homeless. You remember that homeless Disney worker who died in her car in March? It's a big assumption that just because someone is poor that they're not employed. Consider kids. Homelessness among LGBT youth is a big issue. And I don't know what the expectation for homeless kids living rough is with regards towards their productiveness towards society. But hey, while we're considering kids, what if a homeless family set up near their kid's school? I mean, a kid goes to school based on their address, so where do homeless kids go to school? What if this was already that kid's school and they walk there every morning to class? That's probably not the case, but my issue is that this article doesn't even care to ask about that. It assumes that the homeless are a threat and that fixing their camp was the obvious and only solution. I don't want to get into it, but consider that getting gainful employment involves a certain amount of paperwork. Paperwork you wouldn't carry with you if you had a place, I don't know, like a camp or something to keep it. Consider if the police will return the items they confiscated. If they even kept them instead of throwing them away. They cataloged them in a way that folks could even claim their stuff later. How were folks going to get a job if the police took their social security cards? Birth certificates, driver's licenses? I mean, yeah, you should not go anywhere without your ID, but apparently that's a thing people do, and they shouldn't, but they do it, and they would be screwed in so many ways. The news then says that they don't know how many people were at the camp, but that some of them did go to a local homeless shelter. That is comically uninformative. I get it if the news doesn't know how many people were removed. It's good that some of them went to a shelter. But what about the others? Were they arrested for trespassing? Other charges? Did they decline help? Did they not qualify for the shelter? Was the shelter full? These are all questions that it seems you would ask if you knew that some of them went to the homeless shelter and gave a damn. And yet, this narrative is just selling the good points. The neighborhood cleaned up, some homeless people got help, local homeowners are super empathetic guys, and they delve into a little history of a citywide effort to shut down homeless camps. That's great. But then they mention that only 21% of the homeless people removed by the initiative have accepted services. Oh, that's a nice view. It implies that the other 79% opted not to be helped. It implies that homelessness is a choice. It implies that all of those homeless people could have been helped, when I seriously doubt that's the case. The construction of that paragraph is based on selling the idea that the city is the good guy, that homeless people do not want help. The world is just, and those who suffer, suffer because they choose to. As you sit comfortably in your safe home, know that it's because you deserve it. You deserve all of it. And those without have chosen to be without by conscious choice or incapacity. What you've lost is due to injustice and ill fates, but what others have lost is because they've fallen short. What others have reaped is their due. What you have lived is the greatest of misfortunes, you poor, comfortable, safe, blessed soul. Finally, they wrap up the article by saying they're going to make the land into a park. So it sounds like it was public land the whole time. Yay, not necessarily illegal to be there. It's a good closing because it addresses the question of how they know the homeless folks just won't come back in a few weeks. The solid wrap-up is that they're going to have, and I am quoting here, a great park for everyone to come and visit. I mean, almost everyone, right? So let's talk Last Week Tonight. I don't have HBO, but I do catch the bits of John Oliver's Last Week Tonight that they put on YouTube for us plebs. It went on quite a bit about the president's claim that, he would drain the swamp. Its premise is that his whole administration is the swamp, and he's corrupt, and they're all terrible. And also, there's some mild doxing, and I have stated before that doxing is wrong, and I consider it akin to attempted murder. I agree that the Trump administration is enriching themselves in a cynical use of institutional power, but I don't think that John Oliver's broad conclusion matched his evidence. My real issue is a bit with the president, where he describes the drain the swamp catchphrase. He says that he was told to say it, but he was skeptical, and then he recounted how he said it and people cheered, and therefore he kept doing it, but with more feeling. He literally said that he couldn't believe it. He didn't believe it. And he only mentions it as an issue because his audiences like it. My view of the president has long been that he is simply an animal conditioned by our society to act in a way that we reward without any sense of reflection or ideology. He's a psychological zombie, and he's a horrifying representation of what we consider an American ideal to be. I do not understand how more people don't get that. I saw the Alita Battle Angel trailer. I don't know or remember anything about the original anime. It's weird that Lady CGI anime eyes exists, but okay. It's the stock story of a humble young person who learns they're fated for something more, and when their dad is killed, they counter-murder the people who did it and make the world a better place, probably. I feel like there might be an original idea in there, though. I see cynical remarks on the internet all the time. Like, we learned about another person that Vladimir Putin has killed, and you see someone say, and nothing would change. And we'll all forget about it in a month. And I can talk about that last one in more depth later, but let's talk about the attitude itself. I think to myself, if you're so goddamn smart, if you need us to know you're so goddamn smart, why aren't you using that giant galaxy brain of yours to fix this shit? The Game Awards are for this year are out. When I wrote this, the nominations are up. I think they've been awarded by now, but I wrote this thing a month ago, and I'm not going to go back and update it. I do not pay attention to the Emmys or the Golden Globes, so it is weird to have an award show I'm mildly invested in. The categories break down about the way you'd expect. There's obviously Game of the Year, which, doesn't sound too special when you remember that there are 200 gaming websites willing to call anything Game of the Year. Then there are the general story and production categories. The first one covers direction, narrative, and performance, while the second one includes art direction, score, and audio design. And direction here isn't just what we think of when we think of film direction. It includes the game's overall vision. On a scale of Minecraft clone to Hotline Miami, how original are the game's mechanics, tones, and themes? With the exception of A Way Out and Detroit Become Human, nominees for direction are all sequels, so maybe original isn't the right word? After years of lackluster Spider-Man games, Marvel's Spider-Man is included because while we've known how to make a good Spider-Man game since 2004, we just waited 14 years to make another one. Then the awards are broken down by genre, platform, VR and AR, and mobile games each get their own categories. There's too many genres for me to list them all, but it's comprehensive. Battletech was my favorite to win Best Strategy Game. There are also publisher categories, which reward indie studios, indie debuts, and games produced by high school or college developers. It's a relief because the board of the Game Awards is a top-tier video game company list. Ubisoft, Microsoft, and Steam are just a representation of the types of companies whose members sit on TGA's board. Steam and AMD seem like a minority share of the board who lobby to support independent games, and if that's what's shaking out, I'm glad they're doing it. There's also community awards and ongoing game awards, which are there solely to reward YouTubers and release now patch later titles like No Man's Sky. It's reasonable to recognize YouTubers, but I feel like there should be a distinction between something like No Man's Sky, which did not release the game they said they released, and finally released that game like years later, and whatever Overwatch and Destiny 2 are doing to be called ongoing games. Do loot boxes count as ongoing content that evolves player experience over time? Is this award just completely ironic? I don't know. The last broad category is esports, which I know nothing about. I might look up some of these best esports moments of the year because I'm pretty sure they're exciting, but it is a whole other world that I don't know anything about. The Game Awards aired on December 6th, and you could actually vote in a couple different ways. You could vote on their website, Twitter, Facebook, Discord, or even Alexa. I'm going to roll right into something called the Video Game Awards are a trash fire. This is not a moral high ground call-out post. It's just that while poking around for basic information on the Video Game Awards, I was stunned at the state of the organization. Look, video games are tech heavy, and I expect most of the enfranchised members of the gaming community to have a certain technical proficiency. So I expect an organization advertising themselves as a professional organization giving out awards for the industry to have their tech game on point. And they really didn't. I don't expect the website for the 2018 Video Game Awards to have 2017 when I find it in a search. this isn't like the best awards from last year type of thing. The site itself does say Video Game Awards 2018 once you get into it. Incrementing the year creates separate events. It is literally how these people delineate their operations. And it is insane that something so fundamental is unaddressed. I also decided to check up on their history because that best ongoing game thing category sounded like bullshit. And I wanted to see what games had won it before. It turns out that in their history tab, they have only the barest information on 2017. And this is the really best part. For the previous 3 years, they have a message that says, coming soon. I realize these awards are probably run by folks who have day jobs. They probably pick this up as an extra duty to pile on top of their full-time jobs where they're already overloaded and it requires writing content, and that's hard. I get it. The result is a shit show. The voting is technically voting, I guess. I mean, you can vote on 4 or 5 different platforms, and you can vote once a day. For a clever person, given about 2 weeks until cutoff, it's about 56 votes from announcement to actual tea time. I assume folks with a lot of drive and a lot of time will get those votes, and those people will probably be teenagers. And your voting power also scales with the folks you refer to vote via social media. It's a networking social media gin-up strategy, and the end result has to be the lowest common denominator winning out. But I guess they're also the guys who are streaming the broadcast and to let it sell ad space and buying the games. So, that's the circle. And I know it's a nitpick, but the name is terrible. It is exactly what it says on the tin, I admit. It's better than Interactive Achievement Awards. What does that even mean? An orgasm is an Interactive Achievement Award. There are a lot of game awards, too. The competition for that legitimacy is tight. Too tight not to update the year on your website a month before your show. Game Critics Awards seems like a promising gaming awards, folks. 30 or so gaming media outlets give their awards for the best games each year. Having a large group of studios and gaming professionals who are independent of platforms and studios choose great games makes a lot of sense. That's something I would trust. But their awards are limited to the best of show for E3 every year. That's how Sea of Thieves ended up running against Detroit Become Human for Best Original Game in 2016 and 2017. Dudes, after the first year, it is not original anymore. I'm... Destiny 2 had the decency to release the Forsaken expansion to get itself re-upped. Granted, the meaning of their awards isn't even explained, so who's to say? Also, how do you judge multiplayer or role-playing games at an expo? The Game Developers' Choice Awards seem promising. It's the people who make games giving out awards for games. It's done each year at the Game Designers Conference to select games from the years before. It requires membership in the International Choice Awards Network, which is a self-selected body of game creators. They cannot vote for games which they were involved with personally, but only 400 ICANN members and a few editors of Gamasutra, of all places, perform the final selection of winners, so it's still a small group of folks running the show. I don't like the self-selecting portion of ICANN's membership or how Gamasutra is the single outside organization which has any sway over them, but really it's the most credible awards group for video games I've seen so far. The DICE Awards is kind of like the GDC Awards, but it's a little more elitist and open about mimicking the Academy Awards. It was conceived of specifically to mimic the Academy Awards, and it failed, and they eventually held networking summits with some awards for the leadership of the gaming community. I don't know. Their awards are going to be February 13th, 2019. It feels a little more elitist than GDC. I like to talk with someone about both to explain why they exist and what their difference is to me, but I am busy. The Golden Joystick Awards are run entirely by Games Radar. They've got the best name, though. It's all kicked off because the Game Awards is the laziest award show name. I realize they used to be the Spike Game Awards, but that doesn't excuse it. The other ones at least show who they're affiliated with, even if they're bland. Golden Joystick at least has a spark of creative pizzazz. Anyway, they're run by Games Radar with some help from AMD, and their site wants me to disable my ad blocker, so there's nothing more I care to learn about them. I kind of like the Developers' Choice Awards. I mean, content is content, and rooting for a title and getting smug or angry about its victory or loss is at least something to write about. So maybe none of it matters, and everyone's trying to cram videos and content into your phone. Video Game Awards are the tip of the video games media shit show, and I hope to live long enough to see them straightened out. Do I have enough time? Yes, VA software leaves veterans homeless. In 2017, we started paying veterans going to school under the GI Bill a housing allowance for the zip code they were going to school in instead of the zip code for their home of residence. That is, we started paying them a living allowance for where they were actually living. That seemed like a good idea, but somehow the Department of Veterans Affairs managed to fuck that up, so they rolled the system back, and then that system fucked up, and then it broke. And VA, as of this writing, is now behind by about 35 days on dispersing housing allowances, and for those of you who knows that 35 days is longer than a month, you won't be surprised to learn that has left some veterans homeless. It's left a lot more in dire financial straits as the government fails to meet its commitments to veterans again. This happened before in 2009 when the VA had to send out guys to personally issue $3,000 checks for special cases. The Ars Technica article has a small list of other VA snafus. I have a higher than average level knowledge of politics, but I have no idea why the VA cannot get their shit together. Oh man, I'm just going to talk this one down. I could try to get into this Wells Fargo puffery thing, but it is a whole thing. It is bad. I will try to get to it. Actually, next time is going to be a real fun one. It turns out, have a complete script for why everyone else is fucking up Star Trek and why I am the only person to get it right. It is because I'm very special and insightful. I'm the only one who gets Star Trek because I'm so smart. And I think it's just important that everybody stops making Star Trek, puts down those hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars, and just sits down and listens to me, Van Velding, about how to make Star Trek, because they're all idiots and none of them know it. None of them know it. I got to cut down the headspace on those nether stairs. I'd rather kind of go into a free fall when I pop down those stairs than just, donk my head every 5 minutes. Man, this place is coming along so slowly. I mean, maybe if I hadn't fucked off to Reverendville, but whatever. That is all. Until I get a good sign off.